Sotah Daf Yud Aleph is a lengthy daf discussing Agadata, discussing the stories of Avshalom, briefly Miriam, and then mostly the concept of a Paroi plotting against Klal Yisrael and Mitzrayim. A number of famous Gemaras discussing the stories of Yetzias Mitzrayim and Machloksim between Rav and Shmuel as to how we interpret the psukim. So most of the daf is a large number of psukim and explaining what the psukim mean bit by bit. So in the middle of Avshalom, we're starting at the bottom of daf Yud. The Gemara quotes the pasuk in Sefer Shmuel that says, "V'Avshalom lokach v'yatzav loy b'chayaves matzeves asher be'emek hamelech ki omar ein li bein ba'avor hiskir shemi v'yikra lamatzeves al shmoi v'yikra yad Avshalom ariyem hazeh." So the pasuk says that Avshalom set up a monument in the valley of Gebin Hinoim, which is called Emek HaMelech, and that monument stands there until today. And the reason is because he didn't have a son. So the Gemara is going to analyze this bit by bit. The Gemara says, first of all, Avshalom lokach, he took. What does it mean that he took? So Gemara says, Rish Lakish says this was the beginning of his rebellion against his father David. He took bad advice. He took a bad idea to himself. Now then it's called Emek HaMelech. What is the meaning of Emek HaMelech? So Rav China Bar Papa says, was the deep advice of the king of the world, meaning that this was a plan of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. This was a strategy that he had all along, because it says in the pasuk, Hineni, make a melecha ra mi beischa. David HaMelech, after he sinned with Bathsheba, was told that he was going to have a bad thing come against him from within his own house, and this is the bad thing that was about to start, fulfilling the prophecy that HaKadosh Baruch Hu had given against David HaMelech. Says the Gemara, you find a very similar concept, and that the word Emek means a plan of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. When Yaakov sent Yosef to the brothers, it says, "V'yishlachem Emek Chevron," and there again, Amchina Bar Papa says, "Emek Chevron" means Eitz Amuka Shel Ois Tzaddik, and was the deep advice of that tzaddik Shekover b'Chevron, who was buried in Chevron, referring to Avram Avinu. That Avram Avinu had been told, and he had to have, that his children would be exiled in Mitzrayim, and this was the beginning of the exile to Mitzrayim. By Yosef going to the brothers began the process by which they went down to Mitzrayim when Yosef was sold to Mitzrayim, because the pasuk says Yedei Atedek Igeri Zaracha. That's where Avram earned or received the promise that the Shibud of Mitzrayim was going to happen, and this was the beginning of that. That's what it's called Emek Chevron. Now, referring back to Avshalom, so the pasuk says that he said, "Ki Omar Eli Ben," he said, "I don't have a son." So we're asked, why do you say you don't have a son? It says, "Vayivodu Avshalom shloisha banim ubasachas." It says Avshalom had 3 sons and 1 daughter. So what is the meaning of "I don't have a son"? It says Rav Yitzchak bar Avdimi did not have a proper fitting son for the kingship. It says Rav Chizda, we know that someone who burns his friend's grain is never going to have inheritors, and that's what happened to Avshalom. He burnt Yoav's grain, as it says, "Vayomer el avada v'ru chalkas Yoav al yedei al yadi v'lo yisham sa'orim l'chu v'yatzisu b'eish v'yatzisu avdei Avshalom es achalka b'eish." That Avshalom told his servants to go burn the grain, the field of Yoav, and that's why he himself had no inheritors who was going to take over his position in the royalty. Right, now the Gemara refers to Miriam. We said that Miriam had a midah that she waited for Moshe by the river for 1 hour, and therefore Klal Yisrael waited for her for a week. So the Gemara asks, how is that midah? She only waited for an hour, and she was waited for a week. So Abai says the Mishnah that said that the same is true for good things. That means when we said that there's midah keneged midah, what you do, you are repaid in bad. The Mishnah that said the same is true for good, it shouldn't say the same is good. It should say that for good, it's not the same. For good, it's greater. You'll be repaid greater than what you had given out. It says Rava, but it's not what it says. It says that the same is true. Therefore, Rava says we'll interpret it as follows: that the style is the same. She waited, so she was waited for, but the measure is going to be greater because goodness is greater than badness. And therefore, if she does something good, she's going to be repaid greater. Okay, more discussion about Miriam. It says Gemara explains this phrase by phrase. It says she stood from a distance to watch to see what was going to happen to him. So says Rav Yitzchak, the entire pasuk phrase by phrase is referring to the Shechina. It says about the Shechina, Hashem stood and he waited. The sister, that's also refers to Shechina, because it says Emor l'chachma achaysiat. Say to wisdom, and wisdom here Rashi refers to Shechina. You are my sister. Merachik from a distance, because it says Merachik Hashem near li. Lodas, that is l'deya, because it says Kikel l'deya is Hashem. Ma l'deya ma, so ma refers to Hashem, because it says Ma Hashem lekecha shalom imach. Ye aser, that's from the pasuk Lo Yasa Hashem lekim davar. It says lo because it says Vayikra lo Hashem Shalom. So all these words refer to the Shekhinah. All right, now the Gemara goes to analyze the concept of Mitzrayim deeply. We begin because there's a Mida Keneged Mida in Mitzrayim's plot against Israel. So it says Vayakam Melech Chadash al Mitzrayim Shel Yodas Yosef. So what does it mean that it was a new king? Rav and Shmuel Machlokes. One says that he was really a new king. The old one had died, and the other pshat, we don't know which one is which, said that it's not a new king, but he had new decisions, he had new decrees. The one who says he really is new, that's because it says new, and therefore that implies that he's a new king, not the same as the one that was before. The one that said it just changed his decrees, because it never says that he died and there was a new king that reigned. It just says Melech Chadash, doesn't refer to the death of the old king. Now he says he did not know Yosef, says the Gemara, he made as if he did not know him as well. Even if he was a new king, he shouldn't have known what happened before, but he pretended like he didn't know anything about it. Next it says Vayomer El Amo Hinam B'nai Yisrael. So the Gemara says he was the first one who designed this plot. It was Paro himself who started. It says Vayomer El Amo, therefore he was the one who was punished first. It says Vayomer Lama, he's the one who started it, and he was punished first because it says that the frogs were going to go in him and his nation and in all his servants, so with him first. Next, the pasuk says Havan is chakmalai, let us be wise to him. So the Gemara says it should be lahem, it should be to them. It says Rechama Rabbi Chanina that he wasn't planning against Klal Yisrael, he was planning against the Kadosh Baruch Hu, against Mashiach Shel Yisrael. And he was saying as follows, let's do something which we cannot be punished for, because we know that Kadosh Baruch Hu always punishes Mida Keneged Mida, so let's choose something that he cannot punish us with. So that he said, what should we do? Should we attack Klal Yisrael with fire? No, because Hashem could get us back with fire, like it says, Ki hini Hashem ba'esh yava, Hashem comes with fire, and it says, Ki ba'esh Hashem nishpat, Hashem judges people with fire. Should we attack with the sword? No, because it says, B'char ba'alkol vasar, because he can get us with the sword. So what should we do? Let's use water, because the Kadosh Baruch Hu already swore that he's not going to bring a flood to the world, and therefore he won't be able to punish us with water, because it says sleep. Now he didn't know that there's ways out of that. First of all, he had only promised that he wouldn't flood the entire world, but he could flood one nation. Second of all, he wasn't going to flood, he wasn't going to bring water onto people, but he could have the people go into the water. And that's what ended up happening, that they went into the Yam Suf, and it says in Mitzrayim, Nasam Lakrasai, Mitzrayim went in and chased deeper and deeper into the waves themselves. It says Gemara, that's what Rabbi Elazar explains. What does it mean? Badavar shezadu alehim. Shezadu refers to a pot, and it says the pot which they cooked, they were cooked in that. The plot that they made with throwing the babies into the water, that's what happened to them. They drowned in the water themselves. It says Gemara, how do you know that the word zadu means a pot? It says Vayazid Yaakov Nazid. Yaakov cooked lentils, a pot, a stew, and therefore it means a pot. It says Abba, there were three people that were at that meeting, that were having that discussion with Pari. They were Bilam, Eov, and Yisro. Bilam advised that they should do the plot against the Klal Yisrael. He was killed by Klal Yisrael. Eov was quiet, and therefore he was judged with a lot of suffering. Yisro ran away in protest, and therefore he had that his grandchildren became judges and sat in the Lishkas Hagazos in the Sanhedrin. How do you see that? So Gemara quotes Psukim in Divrei Hayamim, says Mishbechol Sofrim Yoshve Yavetz Tirasim Shemasim Suchasim Hema Akinim Habayim Machmas Avi Beis Rechev. So this refers to the Sanhedrin. The Mishpachos Sofrim refers to Sanhedrin. Yoshua Yavetz is the students of Yavetz, who was one of the Sanhedrin. Tirasim Shemasim and Suchasim refer to Midos of the Sanhedrin, the ones who blow shofar, the ones who sit in the gates of Yerushalayim is Tirasim. Shemasim is that they listen to their fathers. And Suchasim is that they sit in the Sukkos. Now, so all of these are descendants of, is referring here to descendants of Yisro, because they calls them Hema Hakenim, and Bnei Hakeni Chosein Moshe is another pasuk that Hakeni were the descendants of Yisro. Okay, back to the discussion of Mitzrayim. So it says V'nilcham Abonav Olam and Aras. Pari said maybe they will make a war against us and leave the land. So the Gemara says, what's the problem if they leave? If there are enemies, let them leave. What's the issue? So it should say Ve'olinu, and they will chase us out. So Gemara says, or Abba Bakana says, it's like a person who is cursing himself and he makes it as if it's on someone else. So referring to someone bad about oneself, you don't use those words. You always try to pretend that it's someone else, even though you're really referring to yourself. So when he said that they're going to leave the land, he meant to say that they're going to chase us out of the land. Okay, so what did they do? I see of Sari Misim. So the Gemara analyzes this word. First of all, Vaisimu alav on him, it should be on them, it should be aleihem. So the Gemara says this was referring to Paroi. That Paroi put on himself, they put on Paroi himself a Sari Misim. Paroi is the one who was speaking in the pasuk before, and therefore on him refers to Paroi. Sari Misim refers to a brick, a form, a mold that they made bricks in. Sari Misa means a brick maker. And they hung it around his neck. And if ever anyone from Kleisel complained that I can't do this, I'm an istinus, I'm too refined to do this heavy work, they said, you think you're more refined than Pari himself? Look, if Pari has a brick maker around his neck, he himself is working. In order to torture them with their work. So the Gemara says, why does it say anoisai? It should be anoisam, to make him suffer. It should be them. So the Gemara says again, refers to Pari himself, to make Paroi suffer in the travails of Yisrael, so it should look like he's also involved. Okay, then Vayivan Ari Miskanais Lepari, they built cities of Miskanais. What cities of Miskanais? So Rav and Shmuel Mechlekes, one says Miskanais and Misakanais is Belayan. It is a danger to those who own them, because this caused a kitrig on Mitzrayim, and Mitzrayim therefore suffered in the end because of this. The other one says Shemim Maskanos is Belayan, that it makes their owners cut off and emptied out and poor, because Klal Yisrael ended up emptying their possessions out when they left Mitzrayim. Says the Gemara, it's like an expression called Isaac Bibinyan Mismaskin. Anybody who works in construction is going to end up emptying himself out. Now, what were the names of the cities? So it calls them Pisoim and Ramses. So Gemara assumes that it's not two separate ones. And the Gemara wants to know what was the real name and what was the name that was given for an additional reason. So Rav and Shmuel again. So one says its name was Pisoim, and it was called Ramses because it's Misroses. Because what happened was that as they built it, it would fall down. They would have to build it over again. And this was part of the suffering that Klal Yisrael had to do. The other one says the name was Ramses, and it was called Pisoim because it would fall into Pitahom. It would fall into the earth as they constructed it. Both the same bottom line, that they had to rebuild again and again what it is that they did. Next is as they tortured him, they became more multiplied, more spread out. So the Gemara says it should be Kain Rabu v'Kain Partsu, which should be they became. Why is this Kain Yirbe? He will become more spread out and he will become more numerous. So the Gemara quotes Reish Lakish, says Ruach HaKodesh is saying that it's always going to be like this in the future. They will always grow and spread, as no matter how much you, as you torture them, referring to all the nations of the world, are going to spread and become more multiplus all over. Okay, next it says, they were disgusted by Klal Yisrael. This teaches from the word kutz is the thorn, that the growth of Klal Yisrael in their eyes were like thorns in their skin. They made them work befarach. What does the word befarach mean? So Rabbi Elazar says it's from the words perach, with a soft mouth. They first spoke to them nicely and gave them wages and got them into the work and into the habit. And once they were in the habit of working, they slowly took away what they had made them. Rabbi Shmuel Menachemeni says pricha refers to backbreaking labor. They made their lives bitter with hard work, with cement and bricks. Says Rav, in the beginning it was chomer and levanim, it was cement and bricks from the men, and every all the work that they did, and then all the work in the field. It says all the work in the field, and then it says all the work that they did befarach. So what's that? So Rishon Bar Chameni says then Rabbi Yonasan that they would make them switch. They would make the men do the women's jobs and the women do the men's jobs, just to make it more difficult and painful for each of them. Says the Gemara here, befarach most definitely means back-breaking labor or painful labor. It doesn't mean soft mouth at this point. Says Rabbi Vira Drasha, in the merit of the righteous women that were in that generation, Klal Yisrael were redeemed, because what happened was that the women went to draw water, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu would make fish come into the water that they drew. They had 2 pots full in the pail that they drew, one full of water, one full of fish, and then they would go and cook the water. They would heat the water, and they would heat the fish. They would cook up the fish. So they would have both food and hot water, and they would go out to the husbands in the fields, and they would wash them with the hot water, and they would anoint them, and they would give them to eat and give them to drink, and then they would be together with them between Sotayim. The Gemara explains that that's between 2 walls of the fields. They had a private area so that they could be together inside the ditch where it's hidden from view, and in that schar they received all the loot from Mitzrayim at the end when they left. like it says, Kanfe Yona Nechba Bekesef Evroseh Biraka Charetz, inside the Charetz, inside the hidden place, they became Kanfe Yona. They got like the wings of a dove, and therefore they were Nechba Bekesef, and they had lots of silver. Now, what happened was, because of that, because they were able to get their husbands into it at that point, this made them become pregnant, which they otherwise would obviously not happen. And then they came home, and when it came time to give birth, they would go out into the field and they would give birth under the tapuach. That is under the hill, like it says, Tachas hatapuach ertich, pasuk in Yecheskel, that you are awakened under the hill. And then HaKadosh Baruch Hu would send to them from Shemayim someone, and they refers to a Malach, obviously, who would come, and he would clean the child and beautify the child like a midwife that beautifies the child at time of birth. And that's what the pasuk is referring to when it says, Umol desach b'yom haledas osach lo kares sercha v'mayim l'rachatz l'misha. You didn't have anyone to wash them, to smooth, but Hashem took care of the babies to wash them and to smooth them. Now, they would get for them 2 containers, one of oil and one of honey, like it says, and then when the Mitzrayim would come and try to kill them, and a miracle would happen, they were absorbed into the ground. And then the Mitzrayim would come with oxen and plows and try to plow them, like it says, Al Gabi Chorshu Chorshim, they plowed above my heads, and they wouldn't be able to reach them because they were deep in the ground. And then after the Mitzrayim left, they would come out, they would bubble up to the top, the Gemara describes it, and grow like plants growing out of the field, like it says, you grew like plants of the field. And once they grew, they came, herds and herds of them came home. They grew up, they were raised, and then they came home to their houses, like it says, don't read it as Adi Adayim, but Adre Adorim, like herds and herds. Now, these were the children that grew up in Mitzrayim. When HaKadosh Baruch Hu revealed himself at the Yam Suf, they were the ones to recognize him. Like it says, they were the ones who had witnessed the Shekhinah before, and they said they recognized the Shekhinah there. Okay, back to Parai. Now, Parai tells the Mialdos, the midwives, that they should kill the boys, throw them in the river. So the Gemara says, V'yomer Malchon Tzayim, the Mialdos, the Ivrios. He spoke to the Jewish midwives, Rav and Shmuel. Machogis, one says it was a woman and her daughter, one says a woman and her daughter-in-law. The woman was certainly Yocheved, the wife of Amram. The question is, was it her daughter Miriam with her, or was it her daughter-in-law Elisheva, who's the wife of Aaron? Now, the Gemara says we have a brisa like the one who says it was a woman and her daughter. The brisa says Shifra and Pua were the names. Shifra refers to Yocheved. She was called Shifra because she would beautify the child, or because Sheparu, because she caused the Kaisal to multiply in the days of Parai. Pua refers to Miriam, this brisa says, and that's why it supports the opinion that says it was Shifra and it was Yocheved and Miriam. Now, why was Miriam called Pua? Either because she was po'eh, she would say poo 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 to the child to calm him, or shepo'eh, that she saw Baruch HaKodesh, and she saw that my mother is going to give birth to the one who's going to save Klal Yisrael. Now, what did Parai say to them? He said, what is it when you birth the Jewish women, or Isam al Avnayim, and you see on the Avnayim? What's Avnayim? So Avnayim refers to the birthing cushion, the cushion that the women sit on when they're about to give birth. It says Rav Chanan, he gave them a sign that they should be able to kill the child right when it comes out. Shouldn't give the women a chance to give birth somewhere else and to escape. What was the sign? He said that they're about to give birth at the time when the legs turn cold, like stones, ka'avanim. Some say that he said to them, an explanation that there's a name, the birthing cushion is just usually called a mashber, can also be referred to as avnayim, like it says, just like this yotzer, he sits with yotzer here refers to the potter who shapes a pottery creation with his hands. So he sits with his legs, with his thighs spread apart, and he's holding the objects that he's working on between his legs. Same thing happens for a woman who's giving birth. She spreads her legs and the child comes out between. Now, next thing the Pari said to him was, "In Benhu v'amitin Isai, if he's a boy, then you should kill him." Said Reb Chanina. He gave them another sign, another trick. He said that they could be able to kill them right away without waiting to see what they were. If he comes out face down, then it must be a boy. If it comes out face up, then it's going to be a girl. But Mataran Havialda says, so the Kim, they feared Hashem, but also Kashar Dibar Aleim, they did not do what Pari said to them. So the Gemara says, why does it say Dibar Aleihin? The correct grammar would be to say Dibar Lohen. He said to them, not that he said on them. So the Gemara says, Rav Yisrael Chanina says, he asked them for tashmish with him himself, and they refused. The word Aleihin, like Aleha, like to come onto someone. So what did they do? At the Chiyena, as ha-yolodim, as ha-yolodim, they enlivened the children. So the Gemara says it's not enough that they didn't kill the children, they actually brought them to life, they took care of them, they may have even brought them to their own homes and fed them, and they gave them food and water. So what did they say to him when he complained about Tamarna Hamayaldas El Paro? Kilo Kanashim Ha the Jewish women are not like the Egyptians, they are like chayos. So what does chayos mean? Chayos can mean either midwives or animals. So midwives is the simplest explanation, meaning to say that they midwife themselves, they don't wait for us. The Gemara says that doesn't make any sense, because a chaya, a midwife, requires a midwife to help her as well. Just because she's a midwife doesn't mean she doesn't need one to give birth herself. So what does it mean then? It means that they are like animals. And this nation is compared to wild animals. As we find, Yehuda is called Gor Aryeh. Dan is called a Nachash. Yehidan a Nachash. Naphtali is called a Yala Shlucha, a fleet deer. Yisachar is called Chamor Garem. Yosef is called Bechor Shar. Binyamin is called Ze'ev Yitraf, a wolf. So they all are compared to animals. Even those that aren't compared specifically are included in one general pasuk that refers to everyone. And it says, Ma imcha lavi bein aroyes ravtza. Your mother is like a lioness between the lions. So that's referring to the rest of class are all compared to lions. And therefore, the wild animals who don't require a midwife, and therefore they said that there's nothing we could do. Now, what happened to them? Ahiki Yor Me'alda says, oh, the Kim Yaslahem and Batim. The reward was that they got houses. What are these houses? Rav and Shmuel again. One says it's Bati Kahuna and Leviah, homes of Kahuna and Leviah, and one says it is homes of Malchus. Bati Kahuna and Leviah would refer to Aaron and Moshe, and Bati Malchus would refer to David, who came from Miriam, and therefore obviously from Yocheved as well. Where do you see that? Because it says, Vatamas Azuva, H.S. Kalev. Azuva, the wife of Kalev, the Gemara will soon say is a reference to Miriam. So it says that she died. Rashi says it means she got Sarah. So Vikach Lokov as Ephras, and Kalev took Ephras as a wife. Ephras first to Miriam as well. That means that she was cured from her. Sarah, so Tela is Chor, she gave birth to Chor. And it says, David ben Ish Ephrasi. David was descended from Ephras.